bar none. There's no dumber time of the year than late January or early February.
Yep.
Like, what is happening? What is anyone doing?
I mean, that's surprising to come from you.
My birthday?
Yeah, like your birthday is literally that time.
Yeah. Folks, it's February 1st, but like it doesn't make it any less dumb. Like, nobody wants to go do anything. It's very cold, often rainy. I don't want to go do anything. Like, and what is there to do other than like go and drink? And none of the bars are even open. Like, if it's a weekday, I'm sticking by this.
Yeah.
I think the best part is that if it's not rainy, it's freezing. So you don't really have an option either way.
Yeah. You're staying in.
Or when it is like briefly nice enough, like Saturday, to be outside, you get no advance warning. So you just have to like immediately drop everything and run outside and take advantage of the few hours of like sunlight and nice weather you get.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You do get like, and that's always nice. Like January and February in Sacramento has every like 10 days or so, everything opens up. But this is a time of year for me where I'm like, it's not even like, at least the holidays are the holidays, and that kind of makes sense. And then there's the January time where you're recovering from the holidays and, everyone's kind of getting back to work. But then there's this late January time where it feels like an even deeper void than either of those two.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
So is there a call to action?
I guess
what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. Should we try and speed up global warming?
That doesn't feel like the right move.
No.
Maybe we do a seasonal migratory pattern where like we just aren't here during this time.
I like that.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do that for a long time too. Yeah. Yeah, that's how we do it. All right, where are we going next year?
That is a great question. Where are we going to go?
Well, it's summer in the Southern Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in Argentina.
That's
or the equator. It's hot all year long.
The equator, yeah, we can just always.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. The equator, it's making a big comeback these days.
I'm thinking anything Panama, anything between like Panama and like Colombia or Ecuador, anywhere around there. We could go to like across the globe, but it's just further.
Is that like the Tropic of it's like a tropic of something that's like a band of however many degrees above and below the equator, where it like tends to be the warmest. I'm sorry, social studies teacher
Cancer and Capricorn,
school.
And one is above and one is below, and they're equal distant apart.
Yep.
Right.
But I don't know. This is the weirdest intro we've ever done. Why don't we just start the show?
We should just start the show because I have no clue, but I'm pretty sure it's like the Tropic of I think that it's within that band though is where we should aim our migratory pattern for this time of year.
We don't come back. We'll have a messenger back home until the cum trees are doing their cum tree thing.
Yeah. And then immediately afterwards, after they're done.
When they come, we come.
Voices, things we say, voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Oh, hi, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Flo.
And PJ.
Yeah, we do. Excited for this one. Got a lot to talk about, a lot on the national level today, which I like. Flo, you were just on a Friday night pitching all these storylines. I was like, what is she doing?
I was going through like headlines of the day because I had a little bit of time and I was like clearing out my inbox. And usually I don't get a chance to always go through things. So I'm usually trying to read my COVID updates on Friday and whatever, but I had a little extra time on Friday. So I was like, Ooh, let me just bookmark some things that seem interesting in case anybody wants to chat about them.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, and now we are using these topics, but that was quite some initiative. I enjoyed it. I didn't read it till like 3 days later, but
because it was Friday.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But okay, so no Shannon, no Skylar today. We are recording a day early this week, actually. So Skylar's out there doing City Hall things on a Tuesday. The reason we're recording a day early is because my birthday is Wednesday, February 1st. I did not want to have to record during that. And then Shannon is gone this week and next week because that's her birthday, right?
Yep. Next Wednesday, Shannon turns the big 4-0.
I love it. She's all grown up.
I warmed it up for you, Shannon. Nice over here. Come join us.
Yeah, so that's that with that. And then let's just begin with, hey, we love what we do at this show. If you love what we're doing, you should, maybe just drop like as little as $5 a month on our Patreon. That's patreon.com/voicesrivercity. We have gotten a few new patrons this last month, which I've really liked. Skylar and I did a patron only episode in, I think, December on a piece I wrote in Jacobin. And then Flo and Skylar did the first ever Voices Cinematic Universe episode on Avatar, and that's a wonderful listen as well.
Coming at you next with Cocaine Bear.
Cocaine Bear's coming next month.
Exactly.
And there's more stuff too. I ran into a listener at the bar the other day and she was like, when's your next meetup? And I was like, oh, well, I guess this is the time we should start considering that. So we'll start poking around in our brains on what works for us. And hopefully that works for you listeners and viewers. Maybe when it's, closer to Cum Tree season, because this is just too dreary for me. Yeah. It's the most wonderful time. Let's talk about blood.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need it.
Blood. Yeah.
Sometimes you give it.
Only sometimes though.
Sometimes you cut your thumb when you're trying to bite your nail, and then you have to use your rainbow Band-Aid on it, like I did yesterday.
Yeah.
And apparently some folks who donate love to compare how quickly they would bleed out if they were ever to be cut seriously.
Well, let's talk about blood donations today.
Is that
yeah, no, literally. I have friends who are post like the minutes and seconds that it took for their blood draw to complete.
Oh,
like you would die really quick. That's not a good thing.
It was always like 5-ish minutes for me. What is it?
What I will say is that they may not die really quickly because you'd have to actually skilled
get the good arteries.
And so the goal is like have you perfectly positioned with your arm and you're so that you're getting the fastest draw. So
if I'm there, they'll die quickly.
Okay, well listen.
Okay, so we are talking about blood or giving blood, right? Donating blood.
Yes.
The FDA just came out with a really big change in their how would you put it? Like their policy.
Yes.
Flo, you're the doctor here. Just tell us what's going on.
So basically, blood donations are overseen by the Food and Drug Administration. And so there has been a long history of them deciding what the criteria are for people to donate blood. And so part of the criteria include like age, like you can't donate if you are under 17. Which is why a lot of high schools will have like blood, drives because 17 and 18-year-olds can give. And you also have to weigh at least, I believe it's 110 pounds. There are all of these requirements that are in the interest of, health and safety, including like your iron levels have to be at a certain, at a certain level. Otherwise, you're iron deficient and it can be dangerous for you to give blood.
That's why they prick your finger every time, which is the most painful part of the whole blood giving process. In my
opinion. But one of the things that has been incredibly controversial over time has been the ruling that dates back to the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic that was designed to protect the blood supply from HIV. I think very, notably, there were several people who contracted HIV from the blood supply from, transfusions before we started actually testing the blood for it. And so one of those restrictions was that gay and bisexual men were prohibited from donating blood.
Now, this was put in place in the 80s, you said, right?
Yes, this was like, these restrictions date back to the late 80s and early 90s. And then over time, the FDA basically started like relaxing some of these limits, right? So the most recent update to the limits was in 2020. And what they basically said was, now it wasn't an outright ban. It was, you can donate blood if you have been basically celibate and have not had sexual contact with other men for at least 3 months. Which
This sounds a little, this sounds way anachronistic. Like they should have addressed this 2 decades ago, right?
Yes, exactly. And so many people have been pushing for this because, especially, in more recent years when there have been dangerously low levels of the blood supply, it's like, maybe don't turn away perfectly good blood that people are willing to donate because you have some ridiculous, and outdated policy on the books that's discriminatory and prejudicial and doesn't really have anything to do with the safety of the blood. And also we do test our blood supply and we have much better methods of testing now, so the likelihood, it's not as if we're only going by your word, like, oh cool, you haven't like you're saying you haven't engaged in these high risk things, great, then we're just going to take your blood and give it to somebody. Like, we still have to test it. So
Right.
I get wanting to reduce the risk of getting a false negative and accidentally contaminating the blood supply, but it's just there's so many other protections in place that this feels unnecessary.
Well, yeah, and they're largely doing the job that they needed to do. I looked at the FDA's page on this, and they were talking about the fact that prior to testing in the 1980s, there was a chance 1 in 2,500 units. And since then, up in 2022, it's 1 in 1.47 million transfusions. So the likelihood has dropped drastically.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so so now there is this new policy that this is now 2 years later, but they're proposing to move beyond just the time-based restrictions, and instead screen folks based on their a series of questions that assess their HIV risk, regardless of gender. But some of the things that we're upset about still are anyone taking medications to treat or prevent HIV, including PrEP, are not eligible, which is silly because
To prevent it.
right,
Well,
exactly.
I had a question about that actually, because I was a little like, what the heck at first, and then I read the FDA's website, and they were saying that the available data demonstrates that that taking those may delay detection of HIV by current screening tests, and that was the concern, is that it might not show up and it might create a false negative, basically.
Yeah, and so they are concerned about, that's one potential consideration. The other potential consideration that has come up is whether or not there actually can be a transmission that can occur based on that, because the whole point of PrEP
Right.
is to prevent,
Right.
right? So
Yeah, exactly.
that's why it's a little bit controversial. It's not the part that I'm most concerned about, but it just raises a little bit of spidey sense of like, should we really be screening people out for that reason? And I think that there are some other ways, some other questions that we could potentially ask that would involve us not just deciding that everybody who's there, who's taking PrEP is automatically disqualified. And then the other assessment is about questions about anal sex. And so if you've had a new anal sex in the last 3 months with a new sexual partner or more than one sexual partner, you're not eligible to give blood.
Right. And that's a question they ask now, regardless of
That's going to be
gender
the
at
question
all.
they're going to ask regardless of gender. So you're not going to be required to be celibate, but you're going to be required to not have a new partner and not have more than one partner in the last 3 months.
Why that? Is it the risk of like tearing that introduces a higher chance of infection, or
So anal sex is the sexual act, I guess, the intercourse act that
Been waiting
is
for
the
the anal
most likely.
episode for 3 years. We're finally here.
hang on?
I feel like I'm back in
My time to shine. Let's talk anal.
I do sex ed all the time, except I try to do sex positive sex ed. So of course this is part of it, but it's also about pleasure and knowing your body and all of those things. But yeah, so anal sex is the sex type that is most likely to be associated with the transmission of HIV. And that's, obviously irrespective of gender,
Right.
which is why it's great that this screening, the screening is going to happen irrespective of gender and not just targeting men.
Well, that was what I was thinking. Like, these are invasive questions. At least they're not targeted to particular groups.
Right, exactly. But my question, of course, comes in, with, are they also going to be asking about whether this is unprotected or protected? Because that certainly does make a big difference. The other thing that comes up is the time frame. So PJ, similar to the concerns about people taking PrEP and whether or not that's going to, mask the detection of HIV in blood, and then therefore allow people to be able to transmit through the blood supply. Similar questions come up in terms of like whether or not, if you've had a new partner and or you're newly infected, whether or not you'll get a false negative. But there also are questions about whether or not you would have a sufficient viral load to actually transmit HIV in the first place if that were the case, right? So that's kind of where the questions come up for me in terms of, does this make the most sense? I sometimes err on the side of caution in terms of wanting to protect the blood supply, but I also want to make sure that our feelings about things are not obscuring the facts about things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the answer is?
I think that there's I think we're moving in the right direction, which is
Okay.
why I'm excited about this change in ruling, because I think it does actually get more to risk as opposed to a prejudicial, broad sweeping prohibition on an entire group of people. And I think for now, I'm a little more comfortable with PrEP and with the time frame, given that there are still some questions about what that really means. And I think with some additional research, we could probably answer those questions and then move to future guidance. So that could say definitively whether or not, taking PrEP really should be something that, an automatic exclusionary criteria, or if there is some nuance to that, if it's like taking PrEP and no new partner, and did it are there some other ways that we could get around this? Because that seems like...
Well, you are basically saying the same line as the Human Rights Campaign. They applauded the changes, but said they could be even better tailored to reduce risk to the blood supply and enable more people to give blood. They also said that the FDA should focus on data regarding the risks posed by people on PrEP medications. Did we explain exactly what PrEP is?
We did not. Okay. So PrEP is essentially a medication that people take to be able to lower their risk for HIV infection. So it's taken by people who are not, who don't have HIV at the time, as a way, but it's especially prescribed for folks if they are higher risk for the possible contraction of HIV, including if you happen to have a partner who is known to be positive.
Okay. And it's known to be pretty effective, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Very.
Yes. Incredibly effective.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't read much on this recently, but aren't there medications for folks who are HIV positive that really lowers their risk of giving it to other folks?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it can lower their viral load to the place. I mean, there are some patients who are even undetectable.
Yeah.
So they're still considered to have HIV, but it's no longer detectable because of the success of the treatment.
We're 40 years down the road from like that horrible, wave in the 80s, but like this has, it appears, turned into something that you live with and not something you die with. And not only that, if you're taking the proper precautions, you can actually like have a complete full life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Anything else on this? Like, this is a good, like, and they should keep doing the fucking research.
Yep.
But it's a pretty good. Any other thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I never liked the invasive questions when I gave blood. That always,
Right.
yeah, It's
Well,
a
and they say, and a lot of them are so repetitious. I mean, I'm sorry, but if I give blood multiple times and you're asking me if I visited the UK between 1985 and 1990, how about maybe the second time you don't ask?
should be
Yeah.
on file.
Because it's just 30 or 40 questions. You're just like, I'm just trying to do something nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's for bovine encephalitis, known as mad cow disease.
Mm.
There's another one. I mean, I have been, disqualified from donating
Oh,
because I
yeah.
was taking an acne medication that could, potentially cause birth defects if someone, so you have to wait a certain amount of time after you're off it. I have had to skip donations when I've had tattoos and things like that. So there are, like time frames, right? Where sometimes because of the potential risk of things, they're like, hey, you can't donate now. So, and they do a pretty good health screening, and I get it, right? Like, we are often, I mean, usually when you're getting blood, it's because you are in a medically fragile state, whether that's a trauma or whether that's due to surgery, or which is also a trauma. Oh shoot, there's a cat.
It's climbing my back.
All right. I gotta catch the time on this so I can get a screen cap of that.
I'm like, oh shoot, there's a cat. But yeah, so I understand, and it makes people uncomfortable, right? Often you're in this little trailer, you're in close proximity to other people, and you're being asked all of these questions. And it's not even by like maybe a routine healthcare provider or someone, it's by, a person in a trailer who's about to like take your blood and then give you a cookie
Person
and
in a
send you on your day.
trailer. You're really making this sound
right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Not at
give
all
blood,
sketchy.
folks.
Yes, so please give blood. You're eligible to give blood. I think it's every 57 or 58 days. And if you happen to have, good iron and be in a healthy state, it's a great way to be able to contribute, because our blood supply has been on the lower end more recently. And so
Mhm.
it's really helpful to be able to have people donate if they can.
Well, yeah, and I think it's always been like maybe a week before I get the text that's like, hey, we used it. And it's just like,
Yeah.
wow, that went quick.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. I've never had that.
Yeah.
That's how long it's been since I given blood. I got to start up again. But unfortunately, you all know me. I'm all about just getting tats and doing anal. So
Right.
Yeah.
No,
So
I gotta
it's
find a
hard. You gotta
window.
find a window.
I always
yeah.
see you on those message boards.
yeah.
Yeah. Get
Tats and anal.
That's an anal.com.
Taking acne medication, all the fun stuff.
And acne meds, yeah.
And just a special call out. I mean, all blood types are obviously needed. I'm A positive. But
I'm A negative.
Yay!
I'm O
But
positive.
are you O positive? Well, the O folks
They're
are
always
the
want me.
universal donors.
Yes.
My mom is O. My dad was, interestingly enough, AB, which is a very rare blood type, especially for Black people. So I have questions, but if you happen to be O, especially, they're always looking for blood because you are the universal donor, which means you can donate to people of any blood type.
Yeah.
So that makes your blood even more helpful.
Delicious. Oh, sorry. Yeah, helpful.
Oh yes. Also, if you happen to be a vampire, probably delicious. O is the potato of the blood world, the avocado of the blood world. What's the most like beloved food?
Right. I was
don't
just thinking
know.
that is like one of them,
Let's
like
ask a vampire.
Brussels sprouts, and then another is like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Like an acquired taste, like one is mushrooms, because not everybody can taste them and some people hate them.
Mm-hmm. You can describe it like you're sipping wine almost. Like
Mhm.
some soil in it. Yeah.
Right.
Does anybody
good
hate
legs.
potatoes? That's a good question. Like
Good
I
legs.
don't know that I've ever met anybody who hates potatoes.
I
Well,
love
because
potatoes.
you can make it. It's such a blank
Right.
canvas. You can make it anything you love. So yeah,
It can go with anything, kind of
Mhm.
like blood.
exactly.
That's it. That's the
There we go,
potato.
okay.
We found the potato. We'll do the rest of these on a later ep. We've got some more ground to cover here. It's hard to even imagine doing an episode this week without discussing what happened out in Tennessee. A man, 29 years old, Tyre Nichols. I believe he was a FedEx delivery worker, was driving when multiple cops pulled him over. Yeah, should I be the one? Like, I know about as much as most people know, but here's he basically was told to pull over, and then they had him get out of the car and were giving him all of these sort of like different commands on what to do. And he's on the ground, and I believe that's when they started pepper spraying him, and he panicked and ran towards his mom's house. And these cops, there were many of them, and there were 5 that caught him several minutes later, less than 100 yards from his mom's home, and beat him. And obviously, as we all know, the police report says one thing, right? That he was aggravated, that he wasn't doing what he was told, that he was driving recklessly. No evidence towards that. There's multiple videos of this. No evidence. Did I mention they said that he grabbed for a gun? Also didn't happen. And they beat him, and then sort of cuffed him and put him to the side of a car until the EMTs showed up. And they, in that video, they sort of just bragged about beating him. And he eventually slumped over. Even when the EMTs showed up, they delayed giving care for some reason. And he went to the hospital and died, I believe, 3 days later. His beating was on January 7th of this year. And I mean, of course, this sparks up the same conversations, right? One,
and
the
there's a
cops
local
lying.
tie because
Yeah.
they're from Sacramento.
Yeah,
Yep.
he was from Sacramento.
Like his parents are here, his family are here, all his friends are here.
Yeah. I didn't go there. There was a vigil for him on Monday, the 30th of January, that I missed, but he was well known and well loved around here. I never watched the video of what happened that day because just not in me, couldn't do it. But I've seen so many videos of him skateboarding. He loved to skateboard, and kind of showed him, exercising his passion. I mean, what are reflections on this?
Yeah, like you, I don't watch videos. I've never seen a single one, and plan to continue that practice unless I am sequestered as part of a jury. Because I just feel very strongly that I am not the target demographic I can read about it and know what's happened without I'm a very visual learner. And I have a photographic memory, and so it is very difficult for me to to purge images from my brain, and I just don't want that trauma to be vicariously experienced in that way. It's still a trauma though, of hearing about and experiencing these things. And I think what really stands out to me is, I think a lot of people are wanting to or are grappling with what it means when a system does this, to a person. And then I think people are also grappling with what happens when the system actors in this case are Black and the victim is also Black.
Right.
And
so all 5 cops involved in the beating portion, when they caught him minutes later, are Black men. He's a Black man. I believe the police chief is a Black woman.
Yes.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's important to point out, and I think it does raise concerns. I think people feel like, the conversation about policing has largely been one about, white cops, killing Black and brown people. And I think many of us have always said that the issue is actually the system and the embedded racism within the system, and the embedded dehumanization within the system, and the way that people at the intersections of race and class and gender and ability and disability are often victimized in a very systematic and a very predictable pattern. And so it is unsurprising to me that in a system where that is known as a fraternity, that the Fraternal Order of Police, and where people are brought into a culture, that those patterns would be replicated irrespective of the background of the actor. because it's a system and it's designed to get certain outcomes, and people are socialized and indoctrinated into it. And I think we will mature in our understanding of racism and of oppression when we begin to understand that it is not the sole domain of one group of people, that it infiltrates the way in which we see and engage in the world, and that being Black is not a get out of racism free card, and being white is not, you know, an automatic implication in full stop, right? And that there are ways that we're all socialized into this, and deprogramming that we all have to do. And so I think this just speaks to the real challenges in policing happening right now.
Well, I think it kind of like speaks to kind of an example of that, like an analogy, or I don't know what you call it exactly, but is how women can be misogynist. It's like that whole like internalization of the patriarchy. This is the same thing. It's internalization of the system.
Yep.
So let's ask, you know, this part. The 5 cops were fired, have been charged, I believe, with 7 charges. I think the most extreme one being second-degree murder. And so, you know, they are going into the system. Who knows how it comes out, you know, what the decision is in the courtrooms here. Does that read as progress in any way?
I mean, no. I mean, progress, it's hard for me to measure progress when at the center of all of this is always Black injury and death, right? Like, people shouldn't have to die in order for us to be able to measure progress. And it's really hard for me to view any outcome as just when a person who didn't live to celebrate his 30th birthday won't have any more birthdays. It's senseless, but unfortunately that has been one of the challenges in America, is that we don't really move beyond needing people to die in order for something to change. And I want that to be different.
Yeah.
Well,
What
it's also
about-
been, I was gonna say, it's also been pointed out that there were other, like, I think another additional 20 officers, including another white officer who tased him excessively, and none of them have been brought up on charges. So it feels very targeted.
I was gonna
Like, we're
also
gonna
say
punish
that,
finally, but
yeah.
it's only the Black guys.
Yeah, I believe the white officer who tased him has been fired. I think there might have been charges brought. I don't know. That this would have happened on, as we're recording, January 31st. So I was just reading up on this again today. But yeah, it's the 2 EMTs who didn't administer help have been fired, I believe. They fucked up on a whole range of things there too. It's just kind of a classic storyline of like, I don't know how many times or how many ways you can tell to people like, this can't be reformed. This can't be fixed, right? I mean, it's working exactly as it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we can't feel comfortable. I mean, like, these are obviously the egregious examples, but you know, we also have all the people who are currently, you know, being warehoused in our jails and prisons, and cycling through those institutions as well. And we often don't examine those cases further, in part because many folks don't have a whole lot of resources, and you know, and we deem them criminals, so they don't have a whole lot of political will, right? And so they didn't die per se, although many of them are dying in our jails and prisons with not a lot of fanfare. But you know, there's the whole way that the system is operating, and this is just the most egregious example of it. It's like the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of the things that are happening, and in a system that is not designed with the outcomes that I think people who are progress minded would want to see happen. And so unfortunately, it's almost unsurprising that this is happening.
Yeah. Directly after this happens, right? You have police chiefs and council members and mayors throughout the country going out to community leaders, leaders of churches, leaders of, nonprofits, and asking them to provide this message to the populace, right? Don't go out and do anything violent. Don't go out and, destroy property, blah, blah, blah. Protest peacefully. But there's this, to me, this very just distorted reality here when it's what you're actually asking folks to do is nod solemnly and accept the state violence, accept it for what it is and for what it will continue to be.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't, it's not lost on me that I don't ever hear the mayors saying publicly to the police, please don't go out and harm people.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I actually heard last night from, not from the mayor, but from the uncle, was just like,
last night being the vigil for,
just leave us alone. That's all he was. Yeah. He was just out there just saying, just leave us alone. We're trying our best. This was the best of us. This guy, everyone liked him. He helps folks out no matter what, with no expectation of return. And it's just like, and then you just go and kill him. It's just like, and I felt really bad because his best friend from Sac was there, and he was like, apparently he was the one that got him to go out to Tennessee, and then his friend came back to Sacramento, and he's like, I wish he would have come back to Sac with me. And my first thought was, so he could be killed by Sac PD instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's always this feeling, this what it's called survivor's remorse, right?
Yeah.
And so people wishing that if they could just change one variable in this, maybe things would be different. So
yeah. Well, can we bring it locally for the final segment of the show? Because, obviously on Monday the 30th, we saw every city council member and the mayor do their public statements on this killing, right? Some of them are attended this vigil. I think the new District 1 council member took credit for pulling it together in part. And then the following day, it's as we record actually. And unfortunately, we don't have the answer for you on what's going to happen here. But on Tuesday, January 31st, the city of Sacramento, the city council met to vote on whether or not they'll basically bring in this armored vehicle, this thing called a Rook that's worth $500,000, that can serve as a shield for cops, snipers to move in on a target. It can move it up a story so that they can shoot at somebody from upstairs. They're claiming, obviously, there's no weapons on it, blah, blah, blah. But like, obviously, the cops aren't like holding teddy bears as they approach houses with this shit, right? So they're voting on the 31st whether or not to accept a new Rook, a new tank for Sacramento PD. And I think this is like a very stark image of the twisted fucking irony of this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was frustrated with was because I forwarded to both of you an email from Dr. Corinne Sacco of the
very good
mental
friend
health board. Yeah. Yes. That she had basically mentioned that the cost behind it, the upkeep, the maintenance costs as well, and got a almost giddy response from the chief of staff of Katie Maple, stating basically, oh no, it's covered. This is going to be free. The upkeep is already budgeted for, so I guess we shouldn't count that money as lost.
And the company is going to do training. So
yeah, it's just the best. And it's just like, well, how about we just we don't take things sometimes if they're bad for us, if they're bad for certain communities. How about we don't take them? How about we don't take them if they're going to harm the police's psyche they turn into a hyper militarized force around here and start to think of themselves that way as a us versus them kind of mentality.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide what my public comment is going to be tonight because this feels very close to home. And I think one of the things that Dr. Sacco said that really resonated with me is like, what's the impact on the rest of the community? Because that's that was my experience last year, having lived on a street where there was a police hostage situation and where, the tanks were brought out, the police tape was there. We were never really told what happened. And this went on for almost 24 consecutive hours with flash grenades being thrown in the middle of the night. And, a tank rolling down my very residential street. And
which was likely the rook owned by the sheriff's department, which
correct.
The city of Sacramento borrows from them. So they don't even fucking need this thing.
And then never even being given an update on what had happened. My next door neighbor's, partner was unable to come home and had to stay in Vacaville with his parents overnight. And it, it was terrifying. And I remember being in my house trying to figure out where I should hide, and ultimately sleeping in the bathtub because I was worried that if, at the time my fence had been damaged in one of the storms, it hadn't been replaced yet. And I was like, if the police, if they say the person tried to make a run for it and they start shooting, where am I going to be safest in my house? And I'm hearing these flash grenades going off in the middle of the night. And I shared this both with Council Member Eric Guerra of District 6, as well as with Chief Lester from the Sacramento Police Department afterward, that this was handled incredibly poorly, and that it was traumatizing. You traumatized an entire neighborhood and didn't even bother to have the respect for us to be able to tell us that this situation was over. We just had to tiptoe outside and see that, oh, you all packed up and went home. And so what I'm thinking when I hear this is, they may not literally cost a lot to the city's bottom line right now,
which it doesn't.
May not always,
apparently, it would be gifted to them, right?
Yeah, and so I don't know what the maintenance costs are going to be and all of that, but I'm not even really concerned about that. What I am concerned about is, what is the societal cost? What is the human cost of having toys like this? And I'm using toy very sarcastically, because this is not a toy. And I just don't know. It really causes me to have major pause when I think about a municipal police department having what they're describing as defensive, equipment, but that is of a nature that signifies that we are at war with one another. And I don't love it. And it doesn't make me feel particularly safe, and having been on the other side of one of them.
Well, especially when the Sacramento Bee article pointed out that the sheriff already has one. So if we need one desperately enough, the chances of these type of hostage situations happening back to back and needing more than one of them is highly unlikely. And so we already have one nearby. And apparently we have a dozen or so armored vehicles across within 30 miles of Sacramento. So it's a non-issue that they're trying to act like it is an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an editorial, not an article, and the Bee came out on the side of the Bee's editorial board, came out saying, no, we don't need this. Not only that, Marcos Breton, not the most progressive person at that paper historically, he's landed on the same side of this issue with the people at this point. So I don't know how much more a city council needs to hear that. It's a simple act of not further militarizing yourself. That's it. It's a simple question of that. And you, especially, these new council members, District 1, 3, and 5, where do you stand on that? Katie Maple in 2021 when she was running, said, I think we need to demilitarize our police force. This is literal military equipment being gifted to our police force. Where do you stand on that? Do you actually stand where you say you did 2 years ago?
Well, and from what I hear, it's not even necessarily this equipment that's being gifted. It's literally just a grant. And according to a friend just sent me some of the FEMA guidelines, it can be go for a variety of things. It does not have to go for this, and you will still get the money. And some of the things including like develop whole community partnerships through groups such as citizen corp councils.
Oh my
structures, God. Yeah, structures and mechanisms for information sharing between the public and private sector. It literally does not have to go for this. And this was the first thought they had.
And they want this. They want a fucking tank.
Yeah.
There's a reason the majority of the city does not trust this police force. It's all saying one thing, doing another. It is total opacity with any of the public data we try to get from them. Oh my God, is that difficult?
But it's not just the police force, because the mayor and the city manager put together the agenda for these meetings. And so the city manager is behind this as well, because the police department didn't put this on the agenda. He did.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so where does that bring it? Like, that's
It leaves us
hard
with
thing.
Howard Chan being one of the highest paid public employees in the city of Sacramento, saying what we should do when we have an opportunity to get funds for the city of Sacramento is buy military equipment. That's where it leaves us. And he gets to hide behind this being an SPD request. And he never gets his name dragged through the mud the way that he should, but he is the mastermind behind a lot of this.
He got this fat raise. He gets like $400,000 a year now, give or take.
Yeah, base salary is around $400,000 a year. After benefits, it's over $500,000.
And so, by the way, a little birdie tells me, I think he's cashing out before he leaves because they are looking for a new city manager right now. But, you know, don't quote me on that. But I've been hearing rumblings. So it's like, this is the guy who's making these decisions. And that's the thing when we talk about systems and if we should trust them or trust electoralism. Like, we just had a new election. Will that change anything? You know, it's going to take a 2/3 vote to get it to pass.
Yeah.
I kind of think it might pass.
Yeah.
I hate that it's going to be tight.
So
if it is
2/3, let's do a little prognosticating. Folks, you can tell us after you listen, you'll be able to know if we were right or wrong on this. So it would need, I believe, 6 votes then for it to pass, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that's 8 city council members and the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Who do we think votes yes and who votes no?
The yeses on this, I predict, are definitely going to be Sean Laloe.
Oh yeah.
He's going to think this is a great idea.
Sean's going to be like, baby. Yeah. I don't even live here and I like it.
Interesting. I wonder where Eric Guerra is going to fall on this. I could see him being a yes.
Lisa, despite being at the memorial last night, I can see being a yes.
could see Lisa being
Lisa
a yes.
Kaplan, District 1.
Lisa Kaplan, District 1. I could see Karina Talamantes being a yes.
I do too. I honestly.
So those are the 3 that I'm
3,
most
Karina.
worried about. But the other wild card for me is also Rick Jennings. I don't know where he'll fall on this either. I'm hoping, despite Katie Maples' chief of staff's email to Dr. Sacco,
email.
that I'm hoping that Katie, I mean, I always like to remind people that yes, chiefs of staff have influence, but ultimately the vote is the members, not their staffs. And sometimes they don't always agree with each other. So I'm hoping that Katie Maple is a no on this. I feel pretty confident that Katie Valenzuela is going to be a no on this. I feel pretty confident that my Vang is going to be a no on this.
Now it's just Daryl.
Feel wishy-washy on where Daryl will fall on this, but I think he is going to want to be on the side of a no. I'm hoping that feeling like he has other options for how this money could be spent can allow him to frame this as being the hero of like, these dollars could be spent in other ways, and why don't we do that, right? So we'll see.
Yeah. I think so you're saying Katie Mai, and then for the fourth, you'd need either the mayor or Rick Jennings, who is the one black man on council.
Right. So yeah, Katie Mai, Mayor, Rick, and I'm hoping one of those 3 or 4 that I said were on the fence might be a no as well.
But we only need 4.
We only need 4 to stop it,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, I'm hoping that this gets the more no votes, the more resounding the no is. I think it sets a tenor for the rest of the year in terms of
I like
we're not doing this. So you're gonna have to find another tack. And so I'm hoping that that they show a more united front so that this doesn't become a police officers association starts trying to pick off individual members one by one.
Right. So when you said those 3, you meant council members Guerra, Kaplan, and Talamantes?
Garrett Kaplan, Talamantes, and then I said Rick was my.
Okay.
I like Rick, the mayor.
I think those are maybes in my book. I think Daryl's probably closer to a no in my head.
I'm hoping so.
But Guerra, Kaplan, Talamantes, like for you even thinking any of them are gettable, I love that, and I hope you are right.
I mean, I feel like despite what everybody says, I think Karina Talamantes is one of the most conservative people on the council. I know everybody thinks
took 5,000 in cop money during the election. She did.
I think everybody thinks Lisa Kaplan, but I think it's actually Karina. And I think from conservative on in, I think it's Karina, Lisa, Eric, and then. By the way,
Lalo is on the far end.
Sorry. Yeah. Laloe. Sorry, I skipped over Sean entirely. So yes, Laloe, then Karina, then Lisa, then Eric, then Rick, then the mayor, then Katie Maple,
Vang,
and then Katie Valenzuela. That is my right to left. I totally forgot about Sean. I wasn't even.
You don't even have to think about it. We know where Sean's gonna land.
Yes.
Granted,
but yeah, I'm increasingly starting to wonder that about Talamantes. It's funny too because a lot of people got real mad at me when I hinted early on that she wasn't going to be that progressive, but so it's a breath of fresh air to hear that from you, and to actually hear that she might be more conservative than Kaplan, which I guess
it remains to be seen. But I have just a lot of her signaling and posturing has been more conservative than Lisa Kaplan's thus far.
Yep.
So she has been
playing the Ashley game.
Yeah, what a lot of us were concerned about, which is baby Ashley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
Baby Ashley is might be what we get. I don't know.
Oh man. Well, I think you're right. This will set the tenor for the year and perhaps for the next 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even sooner, because T. Clift has just said that there is somebody who has put his hat in the ring to run against Katie Valenzuela, our favorite person on the dais.
13 months from now.
So we'll see where that goes. Yeah, PJ, what are your thoughts on this? Flo had the floor this whole time.
Well, I agreed with a lot of what she had to say. I like the layout. I like her bench. I don't like the people on the right side of it, but whatever. Yeah.
Yep. It's funny, like for the listeners and viewers, we're going to hang up We're gonna send our recordings out, and then the city council meeting starts. So we're all kind of like prepping emotionally, it looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't know. Anything we should leave folks with beyond that?
PJ, you always have good zingers.
Yeah, who do we want?
Well,
you to
okay,
zing?
so earlier talking to someone about the about where people were gonna fall on this. I made the comment, here's a chance to see whose principles survived the election.
I mean, that's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again those three new folks. I don't know. If Garrett flips, I will be in a great mood about that. But
Well,
he's
this
been
just goes
around
to
a
show-
while. He's getting like nominated by the governor to sit on shit. Like he doesn't have to do anything different this year. That's my concern with him.
Well, I was to say, this just goes to show, I saw a comment on one of KDV's posts, and someone was like, oh, this is great. We have all these women on this council. And I'm like, identity doesn't mean anything. It's the policy that shows you the follow through, whether it exists or not at the end of the day. And that's what we're going to see.
Yeah. And like we kind of say it a lot. It's like representation is very important.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, like when we have conservative Democrats clapping like more female prison guards, like that's not fixing anything, right? That's not changing anything systemically. So what are we really doing? And I don't know. Makes me think a lot about the Ashbys in the world. It's getting that representation in.
Yeah,
Well, shall we?
Yeah.
we shall.
All right. Well, when I see you all, I'll be a whole year older. Next. It's my birthday. I think that's how it works, guys.
Pretty sure
I'm
it's
no
not how math works.
mathematician.
Yeah, that's
That math ain't mathing.
Pretty sure that's how time works. All right, folks. Thanks for listening and viewing. Oh, here's one. You know, our little intro song, the Voices song, that's done by my good friend, Dean Hawkinson of Be Brave, Bold Robot. He is playing Friday, February 3rd at Torch Club. Be Brave, Bold Robot is. So go out there, go support them. Hey, that's something to do. We're moving from January to February. Things are fucking happening now. Let's get it.
I love it.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Yes, happy birthday.
Thanks, y'all. See you next week.